On this podcast, we like to discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. Today, we're focusing on a little talked about HBO series called Spy/Master, which dropped its first 2 episodes May 19th. The series is an espionage thriller based on true events about a Romanian top intelligence officer attempting to defect to the USA back in 1978 in the middle of the Cold War. How well do you know your Romanian history?
I was actually just about to ask you the same question.
Well, now I know it a little bit better. Do you know where to point out Romania on a map, though?
No, I couldn't.
It's right under the Ukraine next to Russia, which makes a lot of sense because the show focuses so heavily on the Soviet influence and the communism in Romania. But in order to understand the premise to the show, you sort of need to have a background in post-World War II politics in Romania, which the show is kind enough to give us in the opening credit sequence.
Oh, interesting.
1958, the Soviet military leaves Romania. 1964, Romania excludes Soviets from their foreign policy. 1965, Nicolae Ceausescu comes to power as president of Romania. In 1967, Romania opens an embassy in West Germany. In 1969, President Nixon visits Romania. That's a few years before he even went to China. In 1977, Ceausescu facilitates the Egypt-Israel peace talks. So, despite being heavily communist in Romania, what they're trying to do and what they're saying in the however many years that have just gone by is that they're trying to distance themselves from Soviet Russia and redefine their country as an independent partner to the West. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a ton that they're trying to get done. Well, just in the intro, you said?
In the every intro that it does. That it goes through all those events. The thing about it is, though, that the Russians occupied, I think in like 1944, Romania, and they kind of just took over. They were just like, we're going to run everything. And that's when they had to be booted out a few years later. And so it's funny how their interference is what really led to this entire series, this whole like drama that's about to play out. So Ceausescu comes to power in 1965. He wants to show the U.S. and the rest of Europe that they're not tied directly to the Soviets anymore. And so he's like helping with Israel stuff. And he's building up a kind of a better image for Romania than it had before, and that's where we learn about Victor Godeanu, who is our main character. He's Ceausescu's personal security advisor, and he's also the deputy chief of Romania's intelligence service.
Oh, okay.
Think of him like James Bond, but like next to Ceausescu all the time in everything that he does.
See, it's funny you say that because Kirsten Peters, she was one of the creators for this show, talked about when she was growing up how she watched James Bond all the time and how she kind of wanted to keep her story, at least here, more grounded in reality than the cartoony villains that you see in those type of movies.
Well, it's not about the villains, it's just about his character so far and how sharply dressed he always is, cool, collected. This guy, nothing phases him, even when like everything around him is falling apart. So he happens to just be a double agent, though, for Russia, right? Yeah. He's been working for them for the last 15 years, basically since they got booted out of the foreign policy. They needed to keep their feet on the ground in some way, so they have a bunch of agents, but Victor, I think, is probably the biggest one that they have. He provides them info, he smuggles stuff for them, what have you, right? But President Ceausescu figures out that there's a mole in his ranks. But he tasks Victor with finding him, because Victor is his right-hand man. The funny thing is, though, that everyone except Ceausescu, the president, and Mrs. Ceausescu, his wife, knows that Victor is the mole. Carmen, who works for the Ministry of Interior, Mircea, who's kind of the foil to Victor, the Romanian Security Commission, they have all seen this photo of Victor and this Russian top brass guy named General Shakarov. And that's been displayed everywhere within the bottom ranks. So they're all aware of it. But that said, their hands are tied because even though they have that evidence, it's not damning enough. Victor is too powerful, too high up, and too slippery to take down. But he does see the writing on the wall. So he ends up having to murder one of his best friends just to cover his own ass, and then he has to bug everyone that he possibly can, even Ceausescu and his wife, to try to figure out what everyone knows at any specific time.
So this is a lot like The Departed, in the sense that Matt Damon's character is the mole in that movie, and Leonardo DiCaprio and his team are trying to find so much evidence, and they almost like are able to get it so many times throughout that he is the mole, but they're never able to actually prove it.
Yeah.
I'm also getting kind of those like TV shows like The Diplomat, The Recruit, at least for the U.S., kind of the U.S. version, where they're talking about the White House and how there's always like some type of information that is going to be leaked or or
Yeah,
something
it's
like
it's
that.
also straight up just like the Americans, where it's like, will they be found out? Will they be caught today? But you're also sort of rooting for that main character.
And Kirsten Peters said that she was a massive fan of the Americans and how that show dealt with like living a double life. So that's like I know was a huge inspiration.
I mean, this guy
for
lives
this
like
show.
a triple life at least. But yeah, so Victor heads off to Germany. That's the place with the embassies, right? And he's formally there to lead this negotiation on behalf of Romania, the repatriation of German Romanians back to Germany in exchange for millions of dollars or millions of Deutschmarks in cash. Okay, but he makes time to then sneak over to the U.S. Embassy because he knows that he has to go, right?
Yeah.
And he's chosen, instead of going to Russia, because the Russian agents were like, hey, it's time to get out of here. You come with us. And he's like, ah. And so he goes over to the U.S. Embassy and he's like, I need to leave. That's our introduction to Frank, the U.S. agent / diplomat who's going to be set in charge of trying to help Victor escape.
Sorry,
right?
can we take a step
Sure.
back? I actually want to talk about. So you said that he murdered his best friend to cover
One of his
him?
best friends. He doesn't have a lot of friends because he's so like absorbed in his work, and it's a very communist society. So like everybody's working all the time. So it's his family life. You have his daughter and his wife, who he hardly sees, and then you have him working with Ceausescu, and then he's trying to do all this sneaky stuff on the side. So that's his life in a nutshell. But there was like one guy who worked in his department who he was kind of close to, and Ceausescu was like, I think that's the mole. And he was like, really? I don't think it's that guy. And Ceausescu was like, I'm sure it's that guy.
Okay.
In fact, the name of the first episode, I think, is like The Hunting Party or something like that. That is where Ceausescu pulls Victor aside and says, you got to murder this guy. And so that's what happens is he takes I forgot the friend's name, but he takes him to this random like lair, and he's like, you got to hang out here for a while because they suspect you. The guy turns his back, he shoots him in the back.
Oh, okay. So that's what you mean by covering himself.
Yeah.
So by this point, they think the mole is just taken care of.
Well, no, because none of the people who have seen the photo believe that his friend was the mole.
Oh, okay.
They all know it was Victor. And so, again, his time is running out. He goes to the U.S. Embassy. Frank's there. Trouble is, Frank is running into a lot of headwinds. Jimmy Carter is busy at Camp David, so he can't reach out directly to, like, up the chains. And his boss, or I think it's the ambassador probably, is this big prick who doesn't want to help Victor. And it's not until the end of episode 2, where I stopped watching, where Victor is actually getting the opportunity to leave this church and like get into a car and drive off. And then I assume that they would take him to the U.S. But by that point, a lot of other stuff has happened, and it's unclear whether or not he's actually going to take that opportunity. And given that the show is 6 episodes, it would be weird if they spent the next 4 episodes with him in the U.S. So I'm going to have to guess that he doesn't actually go with the U.S. at this point, but he may later on in the series.
Yeah, it's also not only going to be 6 episodes, it's also going to be a limited series.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So, yeah.
This feels like a compact storyline. The whole entire thing takes place over the course of like 10 days that they just keep on jumping back and forth from. So it's the 10 days prior to his trip to Germany, but once he gets to Germany, that's where we get backflashes to how far through the investigation Murcia is into figuring out that he is the mole, or getting the evidence that he needs to present to Ceausescu. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, because I remember I was doing some research and I heard that they did not want to shoot this thing chronologically. That was like the one thing that they said they were absolutely not going to do because it was going to be so much of a mess if they even tried to attempt to do that.
Yeah, it is still very busy because you have to go to all these different locations and you have to pay attention, and sometimes he's wearing very similar outfits, so like you'll be confused if he's in like the present storyline or if he's from a few days ago. But there are other cues that you can sort of fall back on in order to understand where you are in the story. Back home in Romania, during his time in Germany, Murcia has accumulated the evidence that he needs.
Okay.
Okay, so what happens is it basically falls into his lap. There was this van that was going across the Romanian border, and these agents stop it. It had diplomatic tags on it, but it was smuggling goods. And they torture the driver until they give up that they were actually taking the goods to Victor's warehouse. Now, what is Victor's warehouse? You might be wondering. Victor's warehouse is filled with these expensive smuggled items, the wines, the purses, the jewelry. And he's not just keeping them to have a ton of money. He might be doing that for the long run. But really what he's doing is he's using these things as gifts that he gives to the wives of important officials, including like Ceausescu. He gives it to his wife, but also Murcia's wife. And what he does is he puts bugs in them. So that's that's where he's listening to stuff. And Mircea, one of my favorite scenes is early on when they're introducing the two's characters, and he's like, I have a gift for you. And Victor goes in and he opens a box and he sees that Mircea has taken his own shoes out and removed the bottom heel and found the bug that Victor has placed in it, or had placed in it, and had been using against him. So they're well aware of each other's like sneakiness.
So it seems like you see that in every type of TV show. I even know that you can go onto YouTube and see actual like KGB spies reviewing actual TV shows about like how you would either like put messages inside coins or bugs inside coins. Or just things
but this
like
was
that.
before this was all before digital stuff, so it was all like analog recording devices. Or the strange thing about having it in a shoe to me was that, like, how would you be able to hear unless the guy was like sitting down and maybe putting his like foot on his leg or something? Like, how did that even work? Maybe at this point, I think it's more about the quantity than the quality of the devices.
That
like, he
makes sense.
just keeps on trying to figure out until one works. But yeah, once they figure out about the warehouse, the only thing they have to do is find out where the warehouse is, and they finally do while Victor is in Germany. And once they do, Mircea goes to Ceausescu and Ceausescu's wife and shows them the evidence, and they are hesitant to believe it, but they still order Victor home.
Okay.
Okay? So at the same time, Ingrid... when he went to the U.S. Embassy the first time, he gets recognized by this German agent, and her name is Ingrid, and at first we think she's going to be a problem because she confronts him with a gun in his hotel room later on that day. That's the end of the first episode.
Yeah.
But then it turns out that the gun is actually a lighter that he gave her, and that they're having an affair together, and that she's just like one of those people. It's like a James Bond thing.
So you're telling me that the first episode ends
with her holding a gun to him.
And Ingrid is in the apartment with a gun towards him, kind of like Florida Man almost. But then in the second episode,
they're kind of just smoking in bed because they've just had sex.
It's shown to kind of be a joke almost.
Well, we don't even know what happened to the gun until after the sex scene where she pulls out the gun and then she pulls the trigger and it just comes out as a lighter. And he's like, you should be careful with that because someone might think it's real. Point is, he's James Bond. She later on figures out that he's planning to defect to the U.S., but other than being like, you belong here with me, she doesn't do much beyond that. Carmen, however, is a bigger problem. She's like Mircea, where she works for Romania, and she's kind of his babysitter who's been watching him while he has been in Germany and like highly suspects that he's planning to defect. Russia has also figured out that he plans to defect to the U.S. So everybody knows at this point. And the remaining question is, will he be able to? Will he be able to talk his way out of it if he decides not to defect? Will his family, particularly his daughter Ileana, be okay? Or Elena, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And but overall, he's truly fucked. Like right now, all the walls are closing in, and he's been threatened even by the Soviets. But like, nothing has been done to him quite yet.
So let's talk about Carmen for a quick second.
Yes.
The actress Anu Ularu, she's from Romania, and of course it takes place there. But she said that like Carmen and Victor, you said that Carmen is more like his babysitter.
Yeah. Well, so they try to murder Carmen in the first episode. Carmen is the person with the negative. She gets it from the French, I think, who have the picture of Victor and the Russian people, right?
Yeah.
But Russia gets word of that, so Russia sends their goons in a car chase after her in Romania. So she turns a corner, the Russians follow her, she gets in a car, she drives down, gets into an accident, the Russians come out with their AKs and just shoot up the car.
So that's where
and she dies.
Trailer. She dies?
Yeah, she dies, but then we realize in a quick backflash scene that she actually that was a decoy. When she turned the corner, she actually ran to a different side. They followed the decoy. The decoy's dead.
How does that not come off as hokey? I always feel like when shows try to do that.
Because it was like, it was a spy show being a spy like thing. It was doing a spy thing, and it was really cool.
I see. The thing is that Carmen, at least the actress who played her, said that she is like not very compassionate towards people she finds as suspects. But she also says that her and Victor are kind of cut from the same cloth and like much the same animal in the same ways. So it's like seems like an interesting dynamic that would take place over the next 4 episodes.
If the shoes were reversed, he would be doing the same thing to her. He would be constantly on her back. He tries to, at one point, so the U.S. Embassy is not the only way that Frank is able to contact Victor, okay? Mm-hmm. There's this clothing shop where it's like a cover clothing shop that Victor goes in at one point, and the person sends him to a dressing room. He gets in the dressing room, one of the panels pulls back, and there's an underground layer that leads him to where Frank is, and they can have a conversation. So later on, he tries to go back to the clothing shop and do the same thing, but Carmen is in the car waiting for him, and she gets super suspicious, like, immediately. So he gets into the dressing room, and he's, like, pulling at the panel trying to get in. That's when Carmen walks in, talking about wanting to buy some clothes for herself, and he hears her voice, and he has to leave. But that's at the same time where the Americans don't realize that. They pull back the panel, and it makes a sound, and Carmen, like, immediately walks into the dressing room, but, like, just as they're able to close it off. And so she's, like, looking around the dressing room for a good few, like, for, like, a minute before Victor's like, we gotta go. And so, like, she is super on top of it. But at the same time, I think that Victor is still smarter than her. She also is really annoyed at how much he tries to bug people because he's constantly trying to bug people. That's like that's his thing. If he, you know, the snake guy from the Super Mario game?
Yeah.
Yeah, or not Super Mario, but the Super Smash or whatever. You know how he's like an expert in explosives? Well, Victor would be an expert in setting bugs. Like, he would be able to set a bug in like 2 seconds and then hide it. And then, like, So that's his expertise.
Yeah, so there's two different creators for this show. One I mentioned, Kirsten Peters. She's the one that was a fan of James Bond and really liked The Americans. I feel like she focused more on the drama of this series because there's a different creator named Adina Sadianu. And Sadianu has a background in journalism. I feel like he's kind of more needing to like focus on the facts whenever they were creating this TV show. But it was also directed by Christopher Smith, who you would know because he's directed Alex Rider episodes, but also directed the movie Triangle, which came back in 2009. I found that interesting because they are such different, like, that movie compared to this show.
The only relation with Triangle is the fact that the time keeps changing. So, like, they're able to, So if he had anything to do with how they set up a story, that was cool. The Alex Rider thing, I can't make a connection besides that they're both spies.
Yeah. But I do want to say that the creators talked about how Victor was almost an unreliable narrator. Does that seem like a good way to describe him? Because from what it seems like, it sounds like he was just like this really suave, cool guy.
Yeah. I mean, we're not only seeing it from his point of view, though. Like, the cutaways to Mircea and also, like, Carmen and stuff, we get to see them by themselves. It's not only through his filter. But, yeah, the scenes he's in, it seems as if he's able to always manipulate it in the way that he wants.
So what would you give this show overall?
Overall, it's a good show. It's an 8 out of 10. The pros are that despite hopping around as much as it does, they don't spoon feed you, so I feel like they're respecting me as an audience member. The plot is cool. The main character is cool. There's subterfuge, interception of material. It's like a chess game or a guessing game, and I'm learning stuff that I otherwise would never know, and in a way that, like, I think I'll remember. Then there's also the cool scenes that I talked about already, the decoy scene, the foot bug, the underground layer. And then, so the last thing that Victor does is he tries to set up Mircea, the guy who's going after him, is actually the mole. And by doing that, he gets a redhead who works for him, and I guess he just takes a bunch of photos with her around him, and then he tells Mrs. Ceausescu that Mircea is having an affair with a Russian agent. Okay. And so then when Mircea actually comes back and says, oh no, this is his warehouse and he's got this photo with the guy.
He can't be trusted.
Well,
right?
yeah, originally that's where the pushback comes from, and it shows how good Victor is at manipulating a situation. Also, what makes the show really interesting and different is that it relies on both Romanian and English, and I don't recognize anyone from the cast. So it's so much easier to fall into what the show is doing and not get distracted by, like, oh, look, there's the guy from the neighborhood or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
I didn't recognize anybody. I'm sure you'll be like, this person was obvious, but I don't know. Who was it?
I mean, so I know that you've watched Happy Valley, and Victor apparently was in season 3 of Happy Valley. I believe episodes 4 and 5.
Yeah, if he played Darius, then I guess so. But he has a beard in that, and also, again, this isn't like a main person that I would have seen in a lot of stuff. It feels like they were able to get good actors, but ones who haven't been, like, main actors.
Well, a lot of them are Romanians. However, Parker Sawyer is talking about main actors. Played Frank Jackson. He actually played Barack Obama in the movie South Side with You, which is hailed as one of the best romantic films of all time.
And Obama An Obama love story?
Yeah.
One? Oh,
yeah, the one that came
weird.
out in like 2016.
I think there's been several. I think they've made several movies about Obama's
I only
love
heard
story.
about that one. But anyways, yeah, so the reception for this show has been great. Honestly, it doesn't seem like it's been seen by that many people, but whoever has seen it has really enjoyed it. It only has like 269 reviews on IMDb, but it has a 7.7. No tomato meter yet, but they've all been tomatoes. Midgard Times called the show the best spy thriller of the year.
Oh, you can trust Midgard Times.
Well, decided to stream it and said
Yeah.
that it was well written. And
It's an 8 out of 10 for sure. I would recommend it to anyone. I'm not sure how closely it relates to history. We know that Victor Godeanu is a bad guy, but he's kind of presented as just a hero here.
I know that
So-
the actor who played Victor said he didn't want to do an impersonation of the real Victor, so he wasn't able to meet him. He really didn't read like that many
So
books
the guy's still
on him.
alive, though.
Yeah,
Okay. that's-
and also this is being
that kind of gives away some stuff.
well, this is being hyped as one of the streamer's most popular international offerings.
It's hard to find, though, because it wasn't even being advertised. I just kept on getting White House Plumbers whenever I logged in, and this is such a better historical show than White House Plumbers was. I would compare it to, again, The Americans, the little drummer girl that came out a few years ago, Tehran, like a bunch of different foreign stuff. But I think it goes by a different name in other countries. Isn't it like Intangible or something? I think so. Because when I click on the show, it has it on a little parentheses on the side. So
I think it's a flagship show, kind of, for like international
like
shows.
Romanian stuff, yeah.
Especially for Max after its new merger, because not only that, this is the first show that was really shot in Romania. It was shot in Berlin, more specifically, and apparently,
Well, Berlin is in Germany, but yeah.
it was picked up because of a screenwriting competition in Romania.
Yeah.
So, and then I think they had their film festival where it was first aired in like February of this year. And the only other show that I think that was picked up that we've done from like a screenwriting competition has been Severance.
Oh no, I feel like they've been more than that, but maybe. The only cons I would say is that it requires a good amount of patience. It is a slow burn. I'm afraid it might stall after the first 2 episodes, but I can't like knock it for that because I don't know if that's true. One thing I did find interesting was that before Romania decided to become a communist country, they were actually. Do you want to guess?
I can't.
They were a monarchy, so they actually had. It was the Kingdom of Romania before World War II. Which is weird to think about.
And after World War II, they just decided to ditch the monarchy?
Well, again, the Soviets came in there. They kind of stapled in their own ideas, and then once they left, those ideas remained. However, the animosity they did not remain friends with the Soviets.
So how well would you say your like history is in like the 40s and 50s?
It's getting better with more shows like these. I'm getting smarter.
Okay,
so,
I'm glad you say that because we'll end this with kind of a 3 truths, 1 lie game.
Cool.
We want to see if you can guess which one is the lie.
Yeah.
First one is Operation Paperclip was where the U.S. recruited German scientists, some with Nazi ties, to gain their expertise and prevent Soviet access. Second is the proxy wars between the U.S. and USSR, both fought indirectly in conflicts like the Korean War, Vietnam, and Afghanistan wars. The third one is during the years of McCarthyism, it was widely believed that the senator had access to a classified network of informants known as the Red Scare Brigade. And the last one is, during the Berlin airlift in 1948 to 1949, the U.S. and its allies conducted a massive airlift operation to supply West Berlin, which was blockaded by the Soviet Union.
So this is the way this works, is that everything you said sounded true. In fact, I thought that I had heard almost of every single one, but because I have to pick one, I'm going to have to say A is the fake one, the paperclip one. I thought I had heard of it before, but I guess I think it's fake.
That is actually true.
Damn it. Okay.
The fake one was McCarthyism. Because,
was it called something else?
Yes, it was called something. It wasn't the Rare Scare
That's so
Brigade.
BS, because I knew. I was like, okay, I know it's called something. It doesn't sound like it was called that, but it was true. It was true, right? Like other than that. No. This is terrible. I don't like that trivia. I consider this right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.